Welcome to the Southern Ground Hunting video podcast, and I'm your host, Parker McDonald. The Southern Ground Hunting podcast is dedicated to bringing you the best tips, tricks, and tactics from public land hunters all over the South. I hope you'll stick around and maybe even subscribe. You can also find this podcast in audio form anywhere podcasts can be found by searching Southern Ground Hunting. I hope you guys enjoy the show. Welcome to the Southern Ground Hunting Podcast. This is going to be our first Southern Ground Hunting Podcast that is going to start our video podcast. We're going to keep doing this.
Yes.
This is something we're going to keep doing. It's super easy.
Dude,
Might as well keep doing it.
It looks incredible in here, man.
We redid the office. It looks tight.
It does.
For the guys listening to this, just know that this podcast is being recorded in probably the coolest office that I've ever had.
Yeah, I don't even have an office. So, I mean, this is definitely the coolest office. We got the logo there. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 deer heads. Got Big Boy over there. And, dude, it's just – and then you got the saddle right there. It's just legit, man.
I've got a demo pole that is really cool.
For saddle hunting.
For saddle hunting. Yes, for saddle hunting. Clearly for saddle hunting. I would show you guys, but I don't want to mess up the camera.
No,
but
got the screen gear behind it. It's legit, man.
It's pretty cool. Like literally, I feel like I'm looking at everything that we need to talk about in this portion of the show.
Yes.
So let's start off with obviously what's right here in front of us, and that is the tethered saddle system.
Yes.
Like freaking the best.
The
right?
best.
Like,
the best.
Simply the best.
Predator down there.
Got the Predator. I actually today, I think I sold the saddle on a guy, and we used my demo pole. So we went and ate lunch and had a good time, and talked about deer hunting and stuff. And it was 2 guys, and they were like asking about the saddle. And I was like, listen, y'all want to just come over to my house and try it out? And they're like, sure. So we got on the demo pole, set them up at like 6 inches off the ground on the platform. Man. And I think they're going to go buy one. So,
oh, gosh, that's awesome.
That's pretty cool. Now, Drew, I'm going to tell you something.
Okay.
Today is the first episode of Local Legends.
I'm so excited, man.
Right?
Yeah.
We just got done recording that episode, by the way. We've already recorded it 5 minutes ago.
Guys, it's going to be it's fantastic public land stuff.
It's good stuff. We're talking to a guy named Nathan Killen, who is a freaking phenomenal deer hunter.
Out of Virginia.
Yep. And the country part of Virginia. Let me tell you, the southern part of Virginia. And
loud and proud, man.
So I'm really excited about Local Legends. Obviously, this is a yearly thing that we do. Today kicks it off, but I want to tell you something that you don't know yet.
Okay.
And I didn't tell you because, I wanted to see your reaction right now.
Okay.
You're gonna get a new car. Not really. No, we're gonna give away a Phantom saddle.
Sweet.
Like, really soon.
I love it.
Like, through the Local Legends series.
I love it.
The last episode of Local Legends, which is going to be the last Friday, I guess, in
July.
In July.
Yeah.
That'll be the last episode of Local Legends.
So how does somebody go about winning this thing?
Well, I will tell you how somebody goes about winning.
You like that transition, guys? You see that?
Winning the Phantom saddle. Talked to Greg. Greg was like, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
All right. So another thing that people need to know is that we are starting the Southern Ground YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
I kicked that off today, actually. Put the first video up there. It's just a short welcome video. I'm going to start gradually putting all the old content on that channel on YouTube. And what we're going to do is everyone who subscribes from this point forward, if you're already subscribed, I'm just going to use all the subscribers.
We're just going to grandfather you in.
Yeah, you're entered into the competition. But if you're not subscribed on YouTube, then you're not going to be entered into the Phantom giveaway competition. You have to be subscribed.
So it doesn't matter if you are on any of our Instagram or our open forums. Okay, go to the YouTube page, guys. Go to the YouTube page and not just look at a video. Subscribe, hit the bell, hit the button.
And the easy thing is, if you're watching this right now, you're on the YouTube channel.
Just hit like right now. Subscribe
just
right now.
Hit subscribe right this second. It's super easy, and you could win a Phantom saddle. So we're gonna give that away at the end of July, and I'm really excited about it.
Man,
So Local
excited.
Legends series, we're giving away a Phantom. Go subscribe to the Southern Ground YouTube channel. All you got to do is go type in Southern Ground, find the logo. You're going to see the logo. It's this logo that's behind me right now, which looks awesome, by the way.
Looks sweet.
But yeah, that's all you got to do.
That's it.
Super easy.
That's it.
It's
And
not
then,
hard at all.
And then also, guys, since you're online, they can go to Scree Gear and
Screegear.com. You can save like 15% on your purchase by using the code Southern Ground. All lowercase,
Simple.
all one word.
Simple.
It's
Simple.
easy stuff.
Like, it'll even autocorrect for you.
Yeah, I don't know. Will it?
Probably not. No.
It probably won't do that.
No. But 15% on Scree, guys. It's incredible camo. We used it all last year, and not just used it, like we beat it up, and it's held up great.
Yeah, it doesn't look beat up at all.
Nope.
To be honest with you, I have not washed any of that stuff. That's all been worn at some point or other during turkey season, and none of it has been washed. I think I may have washed my Scree stuff like once or twice, and you know what? It don't stink.
No, it don't. It doesn't at all.
It don't
Doesn't
smell bad at all.
Doesn't at all.
So you need to check that out. But is there anything else that we need to talk about, Drew?
No, man. Just this episode is just.
Yeah, get ready.
Just get ready. It's full of stuff,
Take
especially
some
there towards the end. Man, there's some nuggets. There's nuggets throughout the whole entire thing. So don't jump away from it, guys. It is solid all the way through.
For sure. I'm excited about this. So, yeah, let's get in to this episode with Nathan Killen from Virginia. All right, guys, welcome to the Local Legends series. This is the very first episode of Local Legends, and we are super excited because we have got a guy, Drew, that is pretty stinking legendary.
He just kills.
Speechless.
I mean, he's just go to his Facebook page, his Instagram. I mean, he just kills big bucks.
Yeah, he's
and not only does he kill big bucks, but he writes about killing big bucks.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's a whole nother level.
You know what's really hard to find is a guy that can be well spoken.
Yep.
And also kill big deer.
Yes.
Yes. I think that's what the hardest part about, especially hosting a southern-based hunting podcast, is most of the guys that are out there killing big deer, you can't understand a word that they're saying.
No one's asked us to write any articles about killing deer because we just freak out.
Yeah, we're like, English, grammar? I don't know anything about it. But we have got a guy on today that has, just been super impressive to me, and every time I read something that he's written or listen to a podcast that he's been a guest in, I come away learning something every single time. Yeah. I think everybody does who listens to this guy, and that is Nathan Killen. He's even got Kill in his name.
I mean, with a name like that,
yeah.
I mean, you better be good.
You better be good at it. And he is. Yeah, he's got it. So we got him on the line right now. Nathan, how's it going, buddy?
It's going great, buddy. Just enjoying this beautiful evening.
That's good. So tell me this, all right? Have you done anything? Let me preface by saying this. A guy with a track record like yours, it seems like every single day of the year, you're probably doing something to make yourself a better deer hunter. Let me ask you that question. Have you done anything today that would make you a better deer hunter?
Probably not today because unfortunately I had to go to a funeral today, but I definitely will be this weekend. Me and the girls were taking the horses to the mountains and we'll do some trail riding. So I've always got my eyes and ears open then, and may even hang a couple of trail cameras. So, but it's actually every day I'm always thinking about it. Of course, just like any other serious deer hunter. But that's about it.
That's scouting on a whole new level right there,
man.
Horseback, hanging trail cams from horseback. I mean,
that's cool. So you mentioned you got girls. Are they like as into it as you are, or do you think they will be at some point?
No, my daughter, she is 15, and whenever I say my girls, I'm actually referring to my wife and my daughter.
Oh, okay.
But my wife, she likes to hunt some, and she's killed a few deer. And but my daughter, she is really big time into horses. She loves training horses, and she, matter of fact, she reminds me of me, except her thing is horses and mine is, deer hunting, of course. But that's all she thinks about. She eats, breathes, and sleeps it. So.
Oh, sweet, man.
That's
awesome,
pretty cool.
Awesome. Nathan, where do you call home?
I live in the southwestern part of Virginia, just right in the edge of the coal fields.
Okay.
just outside of a little town called Lebanon.
Okay,
And,
yeah.
Yep.
So let me ask you this, Nathan. There's got to be a threshold somewhere in Virginia that separates like uppity folk from country folk. Are you are you on the country folk side of that? I feel like there's got to
I
be
am
somewhere right there.
I am very deep into the country folk part. If you can't tell by my accent, I'm about as hillbilly as you can get, buddy. But I'm pretty proud to be from where I am from, you know. But yeah, I couldn't imagine living anywhere else besides where I'm at right now.
That's awesome. So one of the things we do with this Local Legends series is typically our podcast focus on a lot of tactics and strategies, and we just usually just get right down to the meat. And that's fine. We're definitely going to get into that with this episode. We'd be stupid not to when we've got somebody like Nathan on the line. But with this Local Legend series, I want to learn about the person,
Right.
and kind of highlight the person's life. And with Nathan, it's going to be no different. And so, Nathan, you mentioned being proud of where you're from. Are you from that area of Virginia? And if so, tell us how you got into hunting around those mountains and even on public land.
I've definitely been here all my life. I was born and raised right here. Matter of fact, I live right now, as the crow flies, within 2 miles of where I grew up on my grandfather's farm.
Oh, sweet.
And but my dad, me and him actually got started hunting together. That was he started probably around 80, and I started in 82. And how we got started was a co-worker of my grandfather's named Eugene Belcher. They both worked in the coal mines. And my dad had been wanting to go deer hunting, and he could never find anybody that would take him, you know. And my grandfather knew that Eugene loved to hunt and stuff, so he asked Eugene, he said, "Do you mind to take my son hunting?" And he said, "Sure." So that fall they went hunting, and actually Eugene has been he's been like an uncle to me my whole entire life. And but that's pretty much where me and Dad got our start. And of course, we've always hunted the mountains. You know, started hunting public ground, and I've hunted public ground my whole life. And of course, I've hunted some private land too, here and there. My dad actually owned some land up in West Virginia, and I've killed quite a few deer up there. He doesn't have that anymore, but yeah, I've just, I guess, cut my teeth right here in the mountains hunting these whitetails, and I just really love it.
That's awesome. Now, did you start out hunting with a rifle? I noticed a lot of your pictures have traditional archery stuff in that. Was that something that started from the get-go, or were you basically, when you started, were you just using a gun?
No, whenever I first started, my first season, which I was only 9 years old, but I started with a 16-gauge shotgun, and I actually killed a deer the very first time my dad set me down in the woods. And
that's pretty
yeah,
legit.
it was pretty cool. And then the next year, I started bow hunting and actually killed my first deer the first day of bow season. And it's been like that ever since. I think that it's just something that has just naturally come, easier for me than, most others, I guess. I really believe that God, whenever he created us, he gave us each individual talents, and I just believe that that's one of mine, that one he gave to me. So
yeah, that's awesome. I wish he'd blessed me with that one.
Man. Me too.
Oh man,
me too.
So that's really cool, man. I love that. It's actually honestly pretty similar to my story of me and my dad hunting together. Nathan, I don't know about you, man, but it makes something really special whenever you're able to learn how to hunt with your dad. He's not the one actually teaching you. It kind of makes that bond stronger because you're kind of going through that all together. Did you experience that same thing?
Oh yes, absolutely. We learned and made mistakes, through it, and that's, of course, we learned from our mistakes. But my dad, he's he's a really competitive person, and he's always been good at whatever he done. And so, I mean, he's a good bow hunter in his own right, as well as Eugene. So I've actually grew up with good bow hunters right with me, so that's helped out a lot. But
Yeah.
Whenever I was growing up, whenever I couldn't go hunting, I was actually building tree stands in the ridges behind the house just to rabbit hunt out of. I know that sounds odd, but I absolutely loved just bow hunting and the process of scouting and putting up tree stands, building tree stands. Back in those days, we built a lot of stands. You go into the woods and you would find a nice forked tree, and you'd start cutting down saplings around the tree, and that's what you'd use to build the tree or the stand.
Sure.
They wouldn't last very long, but that definitely fond memories for me.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, you say that like people might think you're crazy, dude. I remember doing that in my grandparents' backyard and shooting birds out of a little blind that I made out of sticks, like a little makeshift blind. Doing that, like it's something about it, man. And I totally understand what you're saying, and like it's just something that gets in your blood from a young age, and you can't help it. Like if you have an opportunity to hunt something, you do it, and it just gets under your skin, man. And then these deer, like, not only are they fun to hunt, they taste delicious. So
it tastes so good.
So like,
absolutely.
I just got done eating a deer steak. So actually, let's talk about this for a second. I got a grill blew up in my face last night.
I was going to ask you
while I was trying to cook deer meat.
Yeah.
And so I'm clean shaven right now. So everybody watching this video, I
am not.
I look like a 15-year-old.
I wasn't going to say anything.
And like I have this baby face. So because a grill blew up in my face, burnt all the hair off of me. My eyelashes are singed. My beard was singed. It's pretty.
The mullet singed.
The mullet got singed. Yeah. So, anyways,
man, the worst part of that is having to shave your beard. I mean,
I know.
Wow, that's terrible.
I know, man. Nathan, you should have seen it. Like it was like the whole thing just blew up in my face, and my whole beard was like ashy colored. Like it was like every single hair was singed, and like it looked like I had like nice little highlights in my beard. It was terrible. It was the worst, and I got blisters all over my hands.
But you were trying to cook deer meat, though.
I know it. Like,
was it good after you got it all? Like,
oh, dude, I didn't cook it.
Oh, you didn't?
No. I went to Chick-fil-A.
Oh, okay.
I was like,
it's Jesus' deer meat.
Listen, I was gun shy, man. I cooked it tonight. I ended up cooking it tonight, but I did it on a skillet. I didn't turn on that grill. I'm still a little nervous about it, to be honest with you.
I also dropped off some deer meat this week.
Yeah, we had
pretty good.
You made some pretty solid jerky. That was good.
I did.
But so, anyways, well, that was a nice little break away. Let's get back to this stuff, man. I understand completely how it is to where it just gets in your blood. But Nathan, when did you realize like that this was going to be something that was going to be just a huge part of your life?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that I've always felt that way. I was actually listening to a podcast the other day. It had Justin Hollinsworth on it, and I've kind of become buddies with him. But it's funny listening to him talk about whenever he was in school having North American Whitetail magazine, stuffed in with his textbooks, and that is exactly what I did. I would go to school, and I guess that's why I never made good grades, but I was just absolutely in love with whitetails. And matter of fact, I can remember in the 7th grade, I've always been really good at drawing, and I drew 2 deer during the rut, a buck and a doe, and that should be all I need to tell you what the picture looked like. But the teacher come and pecked me over the shoulder, and he looked at me, and I knew I was instantly in trouble. So he took the picture. And just a little while later, he come and got me and took me to the office. And whenever I walked in the office, there was my mom and dad and the principal. And the principal just busted out laughing. He said, "Son, you are a very talented artist here." He said, "But you can't be drawing stuff like this." My dad actually still has that picture.
That's amazing. Okay,
That's
Yeah.
funny.
I gotta tell you, man, you might be my spirit animal because the very first time I got sent to the principal's office was for drawing a picture of a. It was not quite as hunting related, but kind of. I drew a lion like eating a deer, and there was like blood everywhere in the picture. I think I
Oh,
was
yeah.
in second grade or so, and I got sent to the principal's
Yep.
office, and that's when I learned what a lie was because they were like, they said, "You draw this?" Nuh-uh.
Uh-uh.
And then they said, "You're lying," and my dad had to come and paddle me.
Yeah.
So I totally understand, man. I get exactly where you're coming from. That's pretty crazy. It's even better that your dad still has a picture. I
Yeah,
think my
that's
dad
awesome.
threw mine away probably.
That's
but,
awesome. That's awesome.
That's
awesome.
that's pretty cool. So you started as a young guy, got to learn and grow with your dad, and you kind of knew from a young age that this is something that you wanted to do. I'm interested to know, unless I mean, it sounds like you were pretty lucky early on. When did you first kill that first mature buck?
Well, my first, I would say, good buck, and of course it was just a 2.5-year-old deer, but it was a nice 8-point. I was 13 years old, and I had killed a few, other bucks before that. Just you know how it is when you're coming up through your hunting. It's almost like you set goal after goal after goal. And, your first one is just to kill a deer. Then the next one is to kill see how many deer you can kill. And then the next one, well, I'm just going to shoot bucks, and it doesn't matter what it is, But I stayed in that phase up until I was, in my mid-teens. And then I started deciding that I wanted to start, really upping the game because, at that time I knew that, my passion was bow hunting,
Mm-hmm.
Although I did do a little bit of hunting with the firearms, but I can just remember, in my early teens, me and Dad wasn't killing any, really big deer, but during rifle season, you'd always see, guys driving down the road, their tailgates down, and there'd be a really big deer on the tailgate or something, and I was like, that's the kind of deer I want to kill right there. So, I just started making adjustments to what I was doing and where I was hunting, even, in my mid-teens. And I started actually killing some nice bucks. Even during high school, I was about, the only one killing, pretty nice bucks back then. And it's just stuck with me, and so.
What were some of the things that you first started doing early on? I know a lot of people that kind of get into this, I guess, addiction, for lack of a better word. It's really intimidating to start because you don't even know where to start. And so it's kind of hard to teach people how to do that with anything other than personal experience.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I've experienced. And I'm curious to know, Nathan, what are some of the things that you did just early on that you felt like were those deciding factors for you to be able to shoot bigger bucks than anybody else that was around your age?
Well, one of the things that I realized is, and back in those days, every now and then somebody would kill a really big deer. So I just started, kind of analyzing who was killing those big deer and where were they coming from. And one thing that I noticed is nobody was killing them consistently. And normally the bigger deer were killed by somebody that was, like a beginner or somebody that just killed a buck, a really big deer in a spot that they never expected,
Yeah.
So, that told me that I didn't need to be hunting the same type of spots that 90% of other hunters hunted. So
Definitely.
I started, thinking outside the box even then. And I think that's what really helped me, and I eventually started putting two and two together, realizing that, these big mature bucks you could not kill them outside the rut by hunting deer.
Right.
You had to separate the two, so.
Definitely. Definitely, yeah, and I've heard a lot of people say that, over and over and over again. One of the things that I've learned, not not necessarily recently, but in my more recent years of deer hunting, is that just because the sign is there does not mean that's the place that you're going to kill a big buck. And in fact, most of the places where I've killed a mature buck, it has been areas that maybe the sign is just a little more scarce. Have you noticed kind of the same thing, Nathan?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Big bucks, I've said this before, they're hermits,
Mm-hmm.
especially during the day. At night they become more social, but not really as an interaction with other deer. It's more, just sniffing around and figuring out what's going on, and really sitting here thinking, after you asked me that question, growing up, once I got my driver's license and I had some freedom, I was constantly in the woods. Like during the winter months and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I was in the woods all the time, and nobody else ever done that then.
Mm-hmm.
This was back in the late '80s, early '90s. So I think that's one thing that probably helped me. Was I was doing stuff postseason when other people weren't doing anything at all.
Yeah, I mean that's even now. I mean, I'm sure you know this, Nathan. That's one of the things that separates good deer hunters from maybe mediocre deer
Mm-hmm.
hunters, even in adulthood. I can imagine when you're a teenager, that probably. I mean, everybody else is. Most guys, when they're a teenager, they're concerned about one thing, and we don't even have to say it
Right.
on the
Yep.
podcast.
It's kind of what Nathan drew,
Yeah,
actually.
kind of what Nathan drew, what he got in trouble for drawing.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
that's definitely true. And so like that's the only thing that a lot of guys are concerned about at that age.
Or
And,
making getting a job, making some money, getting jacked up truck.
yeah, getting a jacked up truck.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
concerned about that for
Yeah.
sure. But it seems like when I think about my teenage years, I was definitely in love with deer hunting. I mean, it was as much as I possibly could do it. But I wasn't probably going the extra mile like I should have been. Like
Mm-hmm.
most people aren't at
Yeah.
that age. And so I can see, I mean, it really does. And I would say to anybody listening to the podcast right now who finds yourself, younger, maybe you're not married, don't have kids, maybe you're still in high school, whatever that situation may look like, I promise you, your time doesn't free up when you get married and start having kids. Like, it just doesn't.
No.
You have an opportunity at that age to be able to really like dive into it and get deep into it
Mm-hmm.
and learn a lot of things when you don't have a lot of the responsibilities that married and parents have. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Like, and so that's really
Amen to that.
yeah. It's hard. Like it's hard as an adult to be able to try to go and do that stuff. I'm sure in the background you can hear my son crying right now. He's crying upstairs. Like that's life. That's what life is like.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
it's fun and
Yeah.
it's fulfilling. I'm not saying that, but you have an opportunity when you're younger to go out and basically do what Nathan did. And I was talking to you, Nathan, the other day, and we were kind of just talking. I asked you how old you were, and how old are you again? Like 47? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'll be 47 here in just about 2 weeks.
Okay, so 46. We ain't gonna call you 47 yet. 46. 46 years old. I mean, just a ton of success
Mm-hmm.
in a place with where success rates are relatively low. When you talk about mountain bucks, there's not a lot of places that are mountains, and when it comes to whitetail, that they're easy to kill. It's
Right.
almost always going to be hard.
Yeah.
And but you're talking about a guy who's 46 that has had as much success as a guy who's probably maybe in his 60s or
Mhm.
70s. Like that's what I think. I think Nathan. I think you're the youngest local legend that we've ever had on the show,
Mm-hmm. It's true.
which is pretty interesting to think about, especially when you say that. And so I want to know, Nathan. Like, so you were a young guy then, and you knew that you wanted to do this, and you were the one that was going out and maybe being better than everybody else in your hunting career at that point in time. Do you feel at this point, as a 46-year-old, do you feel like you missed out on anything because of deer hunting?
Well, I'm sure that I missed out on quite a few things, but it's nothing that that I can look back on and think that I wished I could have done, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm actually glad, because I'm sure that it kept me away from a lot of things that otherwise I shouldn't have been doing anyway. So,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I just think the good Lord was looking out for me whenever He gave me the passion. So He foreknew what I would probably be if I wasn't. So
that's what I need to tell my wife. Like when I want to go deer hunting, be like, "The Lord is keeping me out of trouble, baby. I'm just trying to hear the voice of the Lord in this."
Yeah, that'll only work for so long.
That's
right. for so long, Nathan. It sounds like from a very early age that you were very mobile in your hunting, and I know we both saddle hunt and mobile hunt, and it's also very interesting though that you started. It sounds like at a young age mobile hunting. Is that correct?
Oh yes, I remember. Back then, of course, I can't remember what the years were. It would have been probably the late '80s. Well, actually, whenever I first started, my dad used to build our tree stands.
Right.
They kind of remind you. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Baker style tree stand.
Yeah.
But that's, my dad, being the talented fabricator that he is, he would build them for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd sling those things across our shoulder, and, we would, hunt somewhere during the morning, and then we'd meet back together and eat, and then we would just go off in a different direction and scout, and then go up a tree. And then a little bit later, I bought a lock-on windwalker, and even today, for today's standards, that stand is a super lightweight stand. I think it weighs like around 6 pounds.
Yeah. People are looking for them right now.
Yeah.
Like, people want to find some.
They're paying high dollar for them, too.
Yeah. They're just very packable. But now, it seemed like stands went from that to, just big, gawky, kind of really, really comfort type stands. And now they're getting back to, super lightweight and just very functional and very packable, and really, I think Lone Wolf Custom Gear is leading that market now. Their products is just, that they're really geared toward the mobile style hunter, and
that's something that they just released. I think not released, but it just went on their website. That .5 stand.
.5, yeah.
Didn't it? You correct me if I'm wrong, Nathan, but didn't it just hit the website like this week or last week?
Yes. Yep. I think just last week. Yep.
That's a sweet stand.
That's going to be an incredible little stand to be able to pack around in the mountains and stuff, So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and Nathan, gear is really important for you, especially the packability, because just looking at some of your pictures, man, that's some steep stuff that you got to deal with right there.
Yeah. Of course, I live right in the mountains here. But whenever you leave the truck, you could hunt close, and sometimes I do, and I have killed nice bucks within eye shot of the road, but that's where they were at,
Right.
And that's you've got to hunt where they are.
Right.
But sometimes I'm 2 and 3 miles deep, and sometimes you're an elevation gain of 1,000 to 1,500 feet. So gear is very important. So I use a Everly stock backpack, and it's nice and roomy, and I can get all my gear stuffed in it and attached to it and stuff. So
yeah, I use an Everly stock as well. I use the X2 pack, and it does everything very well actually. Like it's a really functional pack for me because I hunt a similar. It's not nearly as probably big and mountainous as where you're hunting, but it is the North Alabama mountains. It's the foothills of the Appalachian mountains or whatever, and so we do get some pretty steep stuff, and obviously gear is very important for the gear is important for people who are hunting flatland. If you're trying to go deep on public,
if you're hunting mobile, gear seems to be
important.
Yeah,
but especially when you're talking about like a 1,500 foot difference from where you're parked at from where you're hunting. Is that what you said, Nathan?
Yes.
Pretty close.
Yeah. Some of the elevations that I hunt at could be as low as, around 2,000 feet. But, some of the areas that I hunt are close to 6,000, so.
That's pretty much walking uphill.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
And then downhill. Yeah.
It's nuts, man.
Yeah.
And is it one of those things for you that it's just always been that way, so you don't really know any different? Like, or is it like literally every time you get out of the truck, you're like, well, crap, I guess I'm going to do this thing.
I absolutely love walking in the mountains. And ever since I've been hunting, I've always went as far as my legs would carry me. Matter of fact, I know that my dad has gotten aggravated at me on several occasions because he would say, son, do you not realize that you can kill those same deer closer to the truck instead of going all the way back where you're going? Because, he'd have to come back there and help me get them out.
Yeah.
But I've always been the type of person that had to know what was on the next ridge. And once I got to there, I'd have to know what was on the next one, It's just part of me, I love the experience of the, mountains and stuff. And actually, even our biggest areas around here are getting small to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm looking for new adventure all the time. So
yeah.
And so when you talk about that you're going one ridge to the next ridge, and you like doing that, and you're going out with your family to go hike the mountains and ride horses and do all that kind of stuff. Obviously, I would imagine you're scouting some during that time. Are you like, when you're doing that, are you actually like picking out spots during your scouting, or are you more of a scout and hunt kind of guy? Does that make sense? Are you more of like a preseason scout?
Yes, I actually both. Like during the spring or winter and spring months, right? Immediately after hunting season goes out, I'm already thinking about, I love to shed hunt, but I always scout the areas that I hunted that year, and I also have new areas in mind. As a matter of fact, the guys at work, if they see me sitting somewhere with my phone in my hand, they always say, "What are you doing? Looking at topo maps?" I bet, and that's they're exactly right, because they know how I am. But when we're riding the horses, I've always got my phone in my pocket, and I got my location on there, and I got Onyx or Backcountry Navigator Pro pulled up, and I'm always looking and thinking about what could be potential or whatever. But I'm always that's what I do.
Yeah. Also, too, Nathan, kind of go along with that same thought Parker had. Do you find yourself having kind of like your honey holes that every year you just have a lot of history with deer in there, or are you more, man, I just got to go see that next ridge and I got to go see it, or do you kind of have a history with growing up there, knowing those mountains? Do you know where deer are pretty much going to be, or do you just love to go look at the next ridge over?
I think both. I do have certain areas that I frequent, but I don't frequent them that often, because if what I'm looking for is not there, then I move on. But for instance, if I find a good deer or two that I'm interested in hunting, and I run trail cameras during the summer to verify that they're there.
Okay.
And then once hunting season comes in, and I start hunting those areas, and those bucks have either moved on, or I'm just not having any luck with them, then I have no problem pulling up stakes and going somewhere fresh. Yeah. Because I've always got places in mind, and like during the winter and stuff, it's not always possible to hit every one of those spots. And generally every year I've got, a handful of spots, that I know that there's some big deer in there. So, and matter of fact, one of the spots that I'm going to hunt this year, I left that area a couple of years ago, and there was several really good deer in there, but I knew that they were kind of young, and I've moved into another area and hunted there, and this year I'm going to go back because it's been 2 years later, and I'm sure all those bucks are still there. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they've turned into.
Yeah. So your trail cameras, are they on certain fields, or are they on underneath acorn trees, or where do you kind of put your trail camera to get inventory of a deer that you want to go after?
Well, a little bit of everything. Mostly in some kind of terrain feature. That. Most of the time, it's some kind of terrain feature that connects where they're bedding. And, of course, now, these mountain deer, that they have a lot of different places that they bed. It's not like they have one bedding area. But, I just spread cameras out in those type of spots. On private land or something other, I'll run some mineral. And actually this year, I don't know if you guys have know Troy Pottinger. He's pretty popular right now on podcasts and stuff, but he's from northern Idaho, and he's had a lot of success making mock scrapes. So that's something I'm going to start incorporating into my trail camera strategy during the summer too, because a lot of people don't realize this, but bucks do use licking branch year round, so that's another good way to get inventory. So
that's
I don't have a lot of experience with that.
Popular.
Yeah, that's something that I've noticed, especially for early season hunting. And I actually heard Andre DeQuisto talk about this on a podcast at one point, and it's been something that I've tried to keep up with since then. Is just the idea of licking branches and kind of establishing that pecking order, especially as the velvet starts coming off that early season. You'll find those areas that are beat down to the ground that look like scrapes. They look like big community scrapes, but it's really just because a lot of deer have been using that and licking those branches, trying to establish that pecking order.
Yeah.
In the mountains, Nathan, is that something that you're looking for in preseason or even the early season? Is that something that you're trying to hunt? And I guess kind of let me give you like a background behind that question. In the mountains that I hunt, typically scrapes are not productive. And I'm curious to know, in Virginia, in some of the places that you hunt, is a scrape ever something that's really productive?
No. and I'm going to get some backlash for saying that, because I'm sure there's hunters out there that like to hunt scrapes, but I know what kind of scrapes that a man should be hunting and hanging trail cameras over. That there are very specific scrapes that if you wanted to hunt, those are the type to hunt. And of course, it's those big truck hood size scrapes that's really dished out, got a big thumb sized licking branch over it, and you can tell that those deer are really working those over. But I've run cameras over those for years, and most of those type scrapes are always located near areas where deer are feeding really heavily, and so you're not going to get and my experience has been that you're not going to get any kind of consistent pictures or sightings of and I'm talking a mature buck, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old deer. You're not going to catch them on any kind of consistent pattern enough to be able to kill them in those type of spots. For me, it's just too sporadic. And and as far as licking branches, and you got to think too, here in the mountains, you don't have heavy concentrations of bucks.
Right.
So in areas with a lot of broken habitat, like say the Midwest or somewhere where you have, several, 3, 4, 5-year-old deer in an area, those type of spots are going to have a lot more activity, versus in the mountains, so.
Yeah, and so I asked that question, and also it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good about that. And actually, last year, we talked to a fellow named Jamie McKay who said the exact same thing. And when I asked him that question, he said, I said, why? Why don't you hunt scrapes? And he says, well, if you set over as many scrapes as I have in my life and not been productive, you'd probably stop hunting scrapes too. And I don't do it. Like it's never been productive for me either. But when I heard Andre talk about these pecking order licking branches in the early season, especially when they're right there close to bedding, that what he has seen is bucks getting up out of their beds throughout the day and going and checking out that licking branch as long as it's still in that heavy cover.
Right.
And I have found a couple of those, not a lot, but I found a couple of them during the early season. And I'm curious to know, is that a scenario that you would hunt, Nathan?
Yeah, if I could find that scenario here in the mountains, but these mountain bucks where they have so much variety and choices as far as where to bed, most of the time they're bedded either behind where the doe family groups are or in a completely different direction. So, they're going to lay most of their scrapes in areas where, there's going to be a lot of social activity.
Yep.
But now I can tell you, in Ohio, now a man would be a fool not to hunt scrapes, especially the last week of October into the first week of November. I have a little bit of experience hunting Ohio, not a lot, but I've run trail cameras there, and I have had some excellent hunts hunting over those really big, truck hood-sized community scrapes. Matter of fact, one of the first big ones I killed in Ohio was over one of those scrapes. Those bucks they're just a totally different animal in Ohio versus here in the mountains. It seemed to me like a lot more daylight active than they are in the mountains. So.
Do you think that has to do? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that in over scrapes anyway.
Yeah. Do you think that has to do? And obviously, it does have to do with sheer deer density. But do you think it has also to do with like in those states like that? That have higher deer numbers, but they also have a higher. They have a lot more areas of concentrated food sources. So when I say a concentrated food source, it's kind of a constant food source as well, like cornfields, soybean fields, and different things of that nature, crops and things like that. Whereas in a mountain scenario, or even really a lot of the South, most of the South, whether it be swamps, mountains, just big woods, whatever it is, we don't have those. We have everything is a lot more diverse, a lot more spread out. There's not really those concentrated areas. Do you think that, Nathan, that has to do with where they're laying down those scrapes and when they're actually visiting those a scrape location is just like that? Their food sources aren't not necessarily as concentrated. I hope that makes sense. What I'm asking.
It makes perfect sense. I think it makes perfect sense, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The more broken the habitat is, the more it's going to concentrate the deer into smaller areas. Like here in the mountains, what's on one ridge is the same as the next and the next and the next and the next. So the deer are really spread out. And whereas in broken habitat, the deer are really, where they bed is more concentrated, and where they feed is more concentrated. And normally the distance between the two isn't that very, far. Now, of course, in the mountains, whenever we have heavy acorn crops, deer don't have to move very much. They can pretty much spend their whole time in a remote thicket on a hillside and never have to come out for anything. So it's just two totally different habitat types, and I believe the more broken the habitat is, the more productive, hunting scrapes and stuff is going to be. So
Yeah, and that was one of the questions I was thinking about when I was thinking about talking to you and talking about mountains. So I hunted the North Georgia mountains last year for the first time, and one of the things that I really like to do is I like to hunt really hard edges, and most of those hard edges are things that I'm finding on Onyx or Hunt Stand or whatever I'm using at that time, and I'm looking for those like pines to a cutover or hardwoods to a cutover into pines. Like I really like those 3 or 4 way transition lines.
Some type of transition. Yeah.
And we did the episode X marks the spot at the end of deer season, and we really talked about those like finding those areas like that are I guess high likelihood areas or whatever.
Right, yeah, areas that have a lot of topography coming together and edges. Yeah, the more topography you have coming into one spot, along with hard edges like you just mentioned, those are just deer highways, man.
Yeah.
Especially, cruising bucks, they love to travel those type of spots. And the more you have come together in one spot, the more your chances go up, of having an encounter of a buck coming through those spots. So.
And the thing I noticed about the North Georgia mountains is it did not seem like there was a lot of those hard edges. There was obviously terrain features that were that made
ridges
sense.
dumping off into each other. And,
yeah, really good terrain features, but it was pretty monotonous just as far as the vegetation. Is that something that you are finding there, or that you have found there in the places that you hunt? Is that it's not quite as common to find those hard edges as far as vegetation is concerned?
No, not necessarily. We have a lot of mountain laurel and rhododendron thickets,
Okay.
So, those create, excellent edges, where they come out into open hardwoods and stuff. So, timber cuts are something that I'm hoping is going to come back. Because ever since, back through the 80s and early 90s, and actually up into the mid 90s, I guess, timber cuts were something that was happening all the time. And that as you guys know, that creates fantastic deer habitat, and it creates, excellent edge habitat. And so all that has went away the past 15, 20 years. And, but I hear it's coming back. I'm really excited for that if it is. So, any type of edge habitat like that is fantastic, and then those are the type of areas that I concentrate on too. So
yeah. So you talked about terrain features, and we talk about that quite a bit on the podcast. But I want to know your take on it when you talk about just those the terrain features that you're looking for, especially when you're talking about topo lines that are really close together, almost where you can't even see them. It just looks like just a giant solid color.
Yes.
What are some of those things that you're looking for when you're looking at a topo map and you say that's where I think I'm going to find the deer sign at? What are some of those things you're looking for?
Well, I like really steep hillsides that join flatter terrain, and generally, where those two come together. That's where I want to be, because I know from experience that these big deer, they like to bed on these steep hillsides. And whenever I talk about steep hillsides, a deer they don't want to lay on a spot that you're going to slide off. That there's going to be some little benches and stuff like that on those steep hillsides, and most of the time that's where the deer will be, But I want to be somewhere, along the edge of that, where those tight contour lines start opening up, and getting wider.
Yeah.
So.
And that's where you actually want to be set up at, or that's where you feel like the deer are at?
Well, that's where I want to be set up at, because I know, I'm going to be as close to the bedding as possible, and it is extremely hard to get set up really good to hunt on those steep hillsides. So, once those steep hillsides start transitioning into the flatter spots, that's where I want to be. And one thing, it's just easier to set up in those spots,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of those bucks will cruise, those areas too, so.
Do you find in those areas that the bucks are cruising, are like side hilling, or do you find them going like vertically, traveling vertically?
No, most of the time they're definitely side hilling,
Okay.
But now they will come up or travel up and down a ridge, like most of the time where those steeper areas start transitioning into the flatter type ground, there'll be a ridge that kind of separates those two,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll travel up and down those spots, and but most of the time around the side of the hill, and it also depends on the elevation that the acorns are at too. Sometimes the acorns are widespread, and sometimes you might find that they're at a certain elevation. So if they're at a certain elevation, they're going to be more likely to travel along the contour line, whereas if they're widespread or just down low or just down top or up top, then they may travel up and down, more so. So it, a lot of it has to do with, where the food is in relation to where they're bedding. So
Let me ask you this. One of the things that I don't typically do a lot of out here is hunt the spines of a ridge. I find a heavy concentration of deer sign, but I don't typically find a lot of buck sign. Just any buck, like not even a difference between young and old. I just don't typically see a lot of bucks on ridge tops, on the spines of those ridges.
right.
They're almost always on some type of slope. Is that something that you're
Yes.
finding, or is there ever a time whenever you feel like a spine of a ridge is a good place to be?
No, I never. Back in my younger years, I hunted the spine of a ridge, but no, you should always be off one side or the other. Most of the time, he's going to travel either the leeward side or if it has cover, both of those two need to kind of factor into where you want to set up. But, most of the time they're always off one side or the other at the top of the ridge. So.
And do you find one of the things that we talk about fairly often is deer finding that thermal tunnel, right? Mm-hmm. So and traveling in that. Obviously, when you're talking about a 1,500-foot gap in elevation, it's going to be hard to find where that thermal funnel or tunnel actually is at. Is that something that you're paying attention to at all? Is it pretty constant there on a certain top third of the ridge or something like that, or is it kind of random?
Well, if you're on a main ridge, yes, it would be more constant than say a secondary ridge. But yeah, I don't think in terms of thermal tunnel or whatever, but actually when you're hunting the leeward side, that's exactly what is being created.
Right.
So
yeah, and do you find? I guess my question here is that the travel of the deer, would it be more? You mentioned what elevation the acorns are falling on. What do you think would predict the deer movement the best, or where they're going to move at? Would it be something like the thermal funnel, or would it be the elevation that the acorns are falling? Because that could vary tremendously.
yes,
So
it would definitely be the location of the acorns.
Okay.
Yeah, I see the buck bedding being very important as far as thermals and wind. That's but whenever wind is in the equation, that's going to be more important as to where he's bedding versus where he's feeding.
Okay. That makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. That makes a lot, and it's one of those things. Whenever you're talking about maybe 300 feet of elevation from the creek bottom that we're hunting versus the spine of that ridge, it's relative. It's a lot easier to find those places, and
Right.
you may not, especially if you're rifle hunting, you may not be screwed out of a buck if he just travels anywhere on that ridge. So, but when you're talking about 1,500 feet, there's a lot of room for error on that type of ridge. And so I think those kind of type of questions are pretty important. Now, when you're looking for another type of area, obviously the first thing that comes to mind when I think of hill country would be, or mountain country would be, a saddle. Like, I think every deer hunter for a long time has said a saddle. That's where you need to be set up at some point or other.
Yeah.
I think you have a pretty interesting take on this, Nathan, and I kind of want to know, does a saddle jump out to you on a topo map, and why or why not?
Well, I definitely pay attention to those type of terrain features, but saddles are just like what you just said, that is where everybody wants to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And, in my experience, bucks will skirt the edge of those type of terrain features. Most people want to set up dead right in the middle of it, to where they feel like that they're catching most of the deer traffic coming through. But now, those big deer, you imagine, hunters hunting those places repeatedly, and then a big buck comes through there during the middle of the night or whatever, and he can smell where the hunter's been, So, he starts avoiding, going right through the middle of that, and he'll be off to one side or the other. And really personality has a lot to do with how those bucks will come through those places too. Younger bucks, I'm talking, year and a half, 2.5, 3.5-year-old bucks, the more social they are, the more likely that they're going to go right through the middle of that type of terrain feature, because they're with they're more interested in social interaction with other deer. So naturally, that's where the other deer travel through. Mm-hmm. A deer that is less social, he won't travel dead center through those type of spots. He'll be off to one side or the other, and because he don't really want that one-on-one contact with that other deer, he's just more of a hermit type deer. And if you think about that, a buck during hunting season that is more social, he's going to get killed a whole lot earlier than a buck that's not as social. So a buck that's using that area, and I know that I'm probably making this sound confusing. I don't know, but
not at all.
No,
not at all.
I'm trying to differentiate the difference between. I guess the easiest way to say it is a buck that is more social will live a lot shorter lifespan than a buck that is less social.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because he's put, a more social deer is putting himself out there, in the visible, and being more visible. So, he's going to die a whole lot earlier. So a buck that is less social, like I said, from the beginning, he's going to live longer. So, the older he gets, he's still going to be less social. So he's going to make it by a whole lot easier. So
right.
I know I rattled on a lot right there.
No, not at all. It makes you wonder if, like let's just say you went out on a deer farm, right? A high fence or something like that.
Yeah.
And you have a bunch of deer that are able to reach maturity. It makes you wonder if they really do, if they do have different personalities, or if they just mature and they mature into being more, hermit-like, like what he's saying. It makes you wonder that, because, obviously it makes sense in your mind to say, oh, they're going to die a lot faster. If they're more social, they're going to die a lot faster. But it makes you wonder if they didn't die, would they still be social? You know what I'm saying? Do you think that they have those personalities?
Yes, absolutely. And the reason I say that is because, all these hunting shows and stuff you see on TV, that, these guys are hunting these private leases and stuff like that. The bucks that they are killing are very social deer. They're you see those big bucks coming right out into food plots and stuff right in the broad daylight and stuff. And I guarantee you that they still have bucks that are less social, that they might just get on trail camera, but they hardly ever see during the daylight.
Mm.
Yeah.
But yet they're still both the same age class deer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
They're allowing those bucks to reach that maturity, because they're passing them up.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that they're killing.
Yeah. Yeah. So Nathan, we talked about the saddle and how you kind of avoid those. But what is something if you picked up a new piece of property with a good ridge system? What is something on a topo that catches your eye? And then also, how do you pick a tree in that you want to set up in?
Well, naturally, I look for the steeper places, and the flatter spots too, because I know the deer, if there's acorns there, that's where they're going to be at night.
Right.
And then whenever they go back to bed, especially the older bucks, they're going to be on those steeper hillsides. So I'm looking for any kind, like a bench or a logging road, anything that connects the two.
Okay.
And for example, a bench. Let's say that I find a bench that I feel like that I can kill or that I know that a big deer is traveling. And really, this gets back to the precision stand placement part that you talked about the other day that you wanted to ask me about.
Mm-hmm.
That's where this comes in. Most of your big deer are not going to travel dead, right on that bench. They're going to be either above it or below it.
Mm-hmm.
So the best place to be, like I just said, is either above it or below it, or on one end or the other of that bench.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have a lot more trails and stuff starting.
Yeah. So where it either kind of peters out or whether it opens up, right?
Well, not where it opens up, but where it starts petering out.
I got you.
Yeah, and most of the time that's going to be where it peters out on the steeper end. Mm-hmm. Let's say that you got a bench that's coming from, a nice open hardwood flat, and as it's coming around the side of the hill, it's starting to get into some steeper stuff. You want to be out on that steeper end.
That's good to know.
That is good to know, and I think it's interesting because a lot of people avoid the steeper stuff. A lot of times people are like, and not because they don't want to, hunt it, or they don't want to go through the effort of getting there because it's steep. It's just because it doesn't look like what TV shows show you deer like to use.
Because the sign is on the flat where the acorn's dropping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Nathan, that's the interesting thing in this is that one of the things that we established that I was telling you about earlier, that it seems like deer sign, concentrated deer sign, where you have a lot, like those main trails, that's not the spot where you're finding the big bucks. But what I've noticed is I'm finding very little deer sign at all, and not even really any buck sign in the areas where the big bucks, where I've killed big bucks. I'm not finding a whole lot of anything there. And so, I'm kind of curious what you're looking for. If it is literally you are looking at a map and you're saying, I know that big bucks are going to use this and they're going to be there at some point. Is that your thought process? Or is it, I don't know if they're going to be there, I'm going to go look for something?
Well, kind of both. I'm not going to hunt a spot unless I have some kind of hard evidence that the buck I'm looking for lives there.
Okay.
Big deer always leave some kind of clue around, of course, but there may not be much to go on, but I know from experience that, and I'm talking outside the rut,
right?
And really and truly, it's those very few days that he's actually with the doe. Outside of that time, in my experience, the older age class bucks, you're not going to catch them in those heavy sign areas. Not during the daylight.
Right.
You've got to, and really, if you sit back and when you scout an area and you see all the sign, okay, and you'll go through areas that have a lot of sign. You'll go through areas that have very little sign. you can start putting the pieces together. Just know not to hunt those heavy areas. Signs with heavy sign. Now you need to consider those type of spots, of course, but you don't want to hunt them. You want to start thinking about, okay, now if there's a big deer in here, where is he coming from? And of course he's going to be leaving sign in those areas. One of the areas I'm hunting this fall. Last year it was absolutely wore out. Because the acorns were really concentrated in that area. There was a lot of really big sign there. But that, I knew that that's not where I was going to kill a big deer. The only time that I would ever kill a big deer there is if he was actually with a doe.
Right.
You need to get back away from that, and that's what I start looking for. I just, okay, I've got a flat here that has a lot of heavy deer sign on it. And then I'm going to start looking for some steep areas, that's, within, a quarter of a mile of there that it's got to have some cover there that I feel like that could hold a big deer, And then I start, looking for some big rubs or something other that would connect the two, So.
Interesting.
Are you ever backtracking that sign?
That's what I was going to ask.
To some of those, like you're using basically that as your ocean and following the creeks
it's
to
almost
where
like
the creeks
it's a
get
destination.
smaller and smaller. Is that something that you're doing from those main big areas of big sign?
Yeah, that would be a good way of looking at it,
Okay.
So Nathan, if I'm hearing you right, because it's kind of like what people with like food plots or like ag land, they take that and then work backwards, following the trails backwards. So you're actually using a bench or a acorn tree or some hot sign as a destination spot, and then working backwards from that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be a good way of explaining it. That's exactly right.
Okay.
And most of the time, most of your doe family groups are not going to be very far from that hot sign.
Right.
But your bigger deer, they're going to be on back from that.
Right.
In most situations, that there's always variables to that, of course, and you need to be able to recognize that whenever that happens. But most of the time, those big deer are back away from those type of areas,
Right.
because if you think about it, whenever you're hunting and you see nothing but does and stuff, and you're never seeing the big deer, but you're getting them on your camera, an hour or so after daylight, that they're coming from a further distance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Nathan, also a question too, just real quick. You've said doe group a couple different times. Outside of the rut, do you jump those does to get to those bucks that are beyond them, or do you kind of ease around them or try to ease around them or play it safe?
No, I always try to come in from an angle that I'm not going to booger anything.
Okay.
Ideally, I don't want to spook a single deer.
Okay.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Because most of the time, whenever you jump those deer, they're going to run right back where the bucks are, and
Right.
if you got deer running back through there, then they know something's up.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. I'm the same way. I have heard more recently people talk more about, I'll bump all those does off, and I know there's a strategy to that in a lot of ways, but it always makes me feel exactly like what you just said, Nathan, that they're going to run straight to that buck who is incredibly smart and already really on his toes, and he's just going to say, he may not know that there's something over there. He may not know that I'm there or smell me or have any way to confirm that I'm there, but just the fact that a doe busted out of there is proof enough for him. I don't really need to go over there. So that makes a lot of sense. So when you're talking about that, I'm always interested in this, and I talk to most of our guests about this same type thing when you're talking about access, especially in hill country. It's very important because you have, when you first get to an area in the morning, it's still dark and your thermals are still pulling. They're still going downhill. But at some point, 8:30, 9:30, somewhere around there, your thermals are going to start rising back up the hill. Is that something that you're paying attention to on your walk in and on your walk out, or one or the other, or is that even something you're paying attention to at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Matter of fact, the one of the bucks that I'm hunting this coming fall, I'm trying to figure that riddle out because he's lived in this one spot for I think he's probably going to be 8 or 9 years old this coming fall, and the all the history I know of this deer, that's where he's at. And I've got to try to figure out how to hunt that deer. There's a lot of people hunted this deer, and but he's still alive. But he's still alive because of where he lives at. He's very. It's going to be very hard to kill that deer just because of the way the thermals are in there and the way that the wind comes across the top of the ridge. I mean, and whenever he gets up and leaves, most of the time it's going to be after dark. But I'm looking forward to that challenge. But yeah, you always have to be thinking about that.
So when you're looking at an area in the mountains specifically, and you're saying this is a good spot for the morning, when my thermals are going to be obviously dropping, are you always looking for a spot where you're going to where you're basically going to have to walk uphill to get to your spot so that your thermals aren't dropping straight down into the bottoms? Does that make sense? Are you always accessing from the bottom and going up, especially first thing in the morning?
No, not necessarily, because a lot of it has to do with which direction the deer is going to be coming from.
Definitely.
It comes back to where the acorns are at. In relative to where he's bedding. So if the acorns are up top and he's bedding on the side of a hill, then he's going to be going back and forth, uphill. From his bed, or if they're, down low, then he's going to be coming downhill during the evening, then going back up. So there's a lot of variables there, and that can change throughout the season, and it can change from year to year, and most always does. So it's just something that you always have to be aware of.
Yeah, sure. I think it's like you said, it's going to be a booger to kill that one deer. It's because it's always a puzzle. There's always some type of puzzle. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about especially killing mature bucks.
Yeah.
And I can think of the ones that I have killed where I put those pieces of the puzzle together. Number one, it was totally worth it.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the butt, like what you said, Nathan. It's a booger, but the payoff, the reward of it is a blast to be able to figure these deer out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've always tried to do is find those common denominator things that I feel like, hey, this is something that I could go into an area and have a pretty good chance of there being deer in that area. Mm-hmm. Those common denominators. For me, it's always been a ditch that comes out of an area with 3 or more transition lines, mm-hmm. right? A low lying area off a ridge that has some hard edges mm-hmm. in it. That's always been a common denominator thing for me. For you, Nathan, it seems like you have a lot of things. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, but what I've heard you say a lot more in this episode than anything else is it all depends on where the acorns are at. Mm-hmm. Would you say that is the number one thing that you're paying attention to on these big mountains?
Yes, but because that changes more so than his bedding is going to change. Mm-hmm. So you have got to stay on top of where the food is at. If you can, it's hard enough hunting in these mountains, because of the not only the terrain but the low deer density. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know where those deer are going to, you could potentially hunt the whole season and hardly see zero.
Yeah.
So really and truly, acorns are king. And we have a lot of years that we have no acorns.
That makes it tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you start looking for areas that have some grass.
Yeah.
And of course around here, well, of course now we do have in the valleys and stuff a lot of farmland. Mm-hmm. So those are the type of areas that you want to start concentrating on. Then some national forest that comes down in behind some private land. So.
Right.
But when there's acorns, you definitely that's what you want to be keying in on.
So are you finding? Obviously, you have to at some point, whether it be scouting or doing scout hunts, you're going to have to find those where those acorns are at, and probably be able to find the specific ones that they're hitting. Is it something that you're going through all season and trying to figure out? Because I know here we have white oaks and red oaks, and the red oaks tend to they have a what is it, a higher acidity level
Yeah, a little
inside
bit
of
more
them,
bitter.
and so it preserves them a little bit
Antacid or
longer.
something.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that are you separating those two and saying at this part of the season I'm looking for the white oak species of acorns that they're going to be pounded, and then later in the season you're looking for red oaks, or is there ever a point where the acorns do not play into your hunting tactics?
No, that I of course for sure, up until mid October, you can be hunting white oaks, but once they're gone, they're gone. Then you start concentrating on red oaks. But some years there's neither. But now, to me, a worse situation, which I really don't mind it, but if you have a really heavy acorn crop everywhere, that can make it pretty difficult.
Yeah.
But if you know where a big deer is, then he's not going to go very far from where he's bedding.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you know where at least one area that he frequents bedding, then I would definitely be concentrating on acorns that's around the fringe of that.
Yeah, yeah.
But
so Nathan, do you go scouting for beds, or do you just look for like a some terrain features that you have traditionally found a big buck beds in?
Well, during season, I don't really go looking for beds, but now outside of season, I will. I like to shed hunt those steep hillsides and stuff, and that's actually what I'm doing. I'm looking for any features or anything within that cover on those steep hillsides that big bucks are going to be bedded on, and generally, you'll find where they're at, and then it's not that hard to locate exactly where they'll be. As long as there's some kind of a flatter feature within that steep hillside, that's generally where they're going to be.
Yeah.
And then you just start scouting around the outer edges of it, and you'll find little terrain features and stuff that those bucks would use when they're exiting those type of spots.
So I've heard you say another thing quite often is you got to know where the buck lives. You got to know where he lives. You got to know where he lives. But also I've heard you talk about how they're not as easy to pattern. They're making rounds. They're making circles. How big do you think that I guess core area for a big buck actually is in the mountains? And obviously knowing this, that in the mountains a deer could literally be one ridge over or one drainage over, and you might never know he was even around. I mean, there's always that possibility, but how big do you think that area is, and how often do you think a deer comes back to the same spot, like the same location where you might be able to kill him?
Well, the buck that I'm hunting this year, I know of around 22 to 2,400 acres that he uses.
Oh, wow.
And it could actually be bigger than that. But I'm going based off of where I know trail camera pictures have been taken of this deer, sheds have been found from this deer, and so he uses a really big area, and I think that's probably pretty common, for these mountain bucks. But it can take a few days for a buck to make a round. And because he, in my mind, what he's doing is he's just going from family group to family group to family, doe group, checking on each one of those. And so, it may take him a day or two. That's one reason that, I remember growing up, reading North American Whitetail and other magazines and stuff like that, and they always preaching, do not overhunt areas. Well, I can see that being true in highly broken areas, where your deer are more concentrated, but that's a mistake in the mountains. Obviously you have to stay on hot sign, or you don't want to hunt over it, of course, but we done talked about that. But you've got to give those spots time to produce. Just because you go and hunt that spot today doesn't mean that you need to give up on it, and because you've left too much scent or something like that. You need to give that spot some time to produce, because it might be 2 or 3 days before that deer ever comes back through there.
See, that to me,
or longer.
That to me is a challenge that I'm willing to accept, because that challenges my way of thinking, and it makes a lot of sense, because I'm the one who's guilty of not. I mean, I may hunt it, 2 days in a row. Most of the time, I won't, though. I don't go into an area where I think a big buck might live and go back and hunt it the next day, typically.
Well, it just challenges that. And Nathan, you probably aren't sitting in the same tree, but also it just challenges that first sit is best sit. I mean, that's what you typically hear.
Yeah, and I still kind of believe that. Do you agree with that, Nathan? First sit, best sit?
Yes and no.
Maybe not.
It depends. I'm going to use Ohio, for example. That would hold more true there than it would in the mountains.
It's good stuff.
And
right
it would
here.
also depend on the time of season too.
Yeah.
And again, back to the Acorns. If you have a buck that is very comfortable, in a 40-acre spot, he's got everything he needs there. There's plenty of acorns. From mid-September up into mid-October, he's probably not going to go very far from there. So, the first sit there, it's going to be more critical, because he's not moving very far. But now once, you start transitioning into later October, 1st of November, then he's going to start venturing out further from his core area. So you're probably going to want to spend more time in, key terrain features, to be able to capitalize on that movement.
So this is so interesting, man. This is worth the podcast right here.
It's another train of thought.
It is.
It's not anything, it's definitely not anything crazy to think about. It makes total sense if he's not there, then he's not there. If there's not a lot of deer in the area, then your spot's not going to get blown out. I mean, it's not rocket science, right?
No, Nathan,
Exactly.
One of the things I was going to ask too, if let's just say that deer's in that core area and you have to be there, do you change access routes just to not get patternable, or do you just go in after him?
Well, that's another one of them depends kind of things. My access, if I have a consistent wind,
right,
and I feel like that I can come into the area and not cross where I feel like he might be coming and going from, then that's what I will do. But now, if I feel like, if I feel like that I could, potentially him pick me up, then, I would definitely alternate.
Right. Right.
So, because I definitely don't want to, booger him and blow him out of there.
Right.
But of course, now the DeQuistos, they're big on, purposely blowing a buck out and then coming back, and hunting him in those spots. I've never tried that. I don't know how that would work in these mountains, because, he's got so many places to choose from.
Right.
Whereas in highly broken habitat, he has less places to choose from. So.
Right.
And that makes so much sense, and it confirms a lot of things for me, which not necessarily things that I didn't know. One thing I do know for sure is when I'm hunting mountains, it's rare that I see the same buck twice in a season. Like even young bucks, I don't typically see the same buck twice in a season, and I'm sure I might more often if I were say hunting the same tree 7 days in a row. I probably would see that deer twice, the same deer twice.
Yeah.
But very rarely does that happen, and that makes a lot of sense to me, because what you are saying, Nathan, is there's almost so there because everything is maybe not ideal areas, but there's so much of it that big mature buck is not gonna benefit from one spot more greatly than another spot a ton, right? Like he's gonna be able to find something
because it all looks the same.
Because it's all so monotonous.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so
and go ahead.
I was just gonna say it just for me, it makes a lot of sense. I've spent a lot of time saying, well, you got to find those pockets because the pockets are where all the deer are at when you can find. But really, I mean, yes, true. That's not false. But also, if you blow a buck out, he doesn't have to be there. He can find something somewhere else.
Right.
Because everything else is the same.
Well, and also it just kind of confirms too, because I know there's guys that we know here in North Alabama that have killed multiple deer from the exact same tree, and they know when they're there.
Yeah.
And so that's good, Nathan. Man, that's good stuff.
You're gonna say something. I cut you off.
Oh, I was just going to say, even though the mountains, it's what's on one ridge is the same as the next and the next and the next. Those bucks are still going to prefer, certain areas.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just because of that, they just like it there better.
Mm-hmm.
And the heavier or the more food there is available to them, the less they're going to venture from those spots.
Right.
The less food there is, the greater chance there is for them to be venturing from those spots.
Mm-hmm.
So that comes in to play. If there's a heavy acorn crop, then you're going to have to maybe worry more about hunting a certain spot less.
Yeah.
Because he's going to be within that area more. And the less food there is available, then you'll probably want to hunt certain features more for the likelihood of one coming through there.
So if you had your choice, Nathan, would you take less food or more food in an area?
Less food. I don't want none, but I don't want an overabundance either. I would rather the acorns be isolated to certain areas. Or a certain elevation, a certain ridge.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me when you think about this. So, they talk about, and Nathan, you wrote about this in the article, that 10% of hunters consistently kill 90% of the deer, right? And 90% of, I'm sorry, 10% of the hunters are doing the work to. And trying to learn and figure out all these things to kill those big giant deer, and I think it makes a lot of sense because when you think about it, like 90% of the deer are in those big huge, flat areas or just the heavy sign areas. That's where 90% of the deer are,
right?
And 10% of them, maybe even less than 10%, are isolated, mature, big bucks.
Where you have to be where the 10% is.
And do you find it interesting though that the 10% are hunting the 10%, right? Like almost as if you have learned, Nathan, to hunt the mature buck animal, and basically just left that 90%. The deer is no longer a part of it. It's the mature buck, which is almost a completely different animal.
That is exactly it. If I could tell anyone one thing to change about their hunting to kill more big deer, is you have to change your mindset because you're hunting a different animal. You can't hunt 90% of the deer if you want to kill that upper 10% animal, because they kind of do, but they kind of don't coexist. Not during the daylight anyway, outside the rut, which is 90% of the hunting season. Whenever you're hunting, from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, you're hunting. The rut is such a small part of hunting season.
Right.
So
it makes a ton of sense to me, man. Like, it's so good, and it's so refreshing, and very rarely do we have a podcast that I feel like actually challenges me
Yes.
to do things a little bit different. Like,
Yes.
I feel pretty prideful in the way that I hunt. I have a lot of success. I do well. This is one that really challenges me to think maybe a little bit differently, and to really, try to come up with, be that 10% and be in those 10% areas, even though those areas are going to have 10% of the sign.
Yeah.
10% of the tracks. The trails are going to be 10% smaller, or 90% smaller. They're going to be. They're just. It's a harder thing to do.
It's a harder thing to do because your buddy sitting on the 90% was like, yeah, I saw 12 deer.
Exactly.
And I saw none. But that's okay because when that one pops out, he's gonna be the 10%er.
Yeah, and you still have to pay attention to all that stuff. You still pay attention where all the deer are at. I'm sure, Nathan. It's not like.
You have to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But once you start having success from that, then your confidence starts going up in those type of areas, and it's then it just comes automatic. Then you start looking for those type of spots on purpose, and once you start doing that and start hunting those type of spots and hunting them right, then you're going to be the envy of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, that's good stuff.
Because you're in the 10th percentile then.
I mean, and that's what I want to be. That's who I want to be. I'm sure people listening to this podcast, they want to be part of that 10% of hunters that are killing those big bucks. So Nathan, we're getting up here. We're at an hour and a half in this podcast. I want to know one thing. If you could leave people with one piece of knowledge, one nugget, what would that be?
Well, it's probably not going to be what you would expect. In this day and age, I think you guys are Christians like myself.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Worship our Creator and not what He has created.
Good stuff.
He put all this here for us to enjoy, but it's far more important to enjoy it right.
Yeah.
And I think this day and age, people get so obsessed with certain things, and I think that really hinders people.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that's not the advice going to be. It's not going to be popular advice with most of your audience.
No, man,
but
that's good.
I think it's very important.
And even if Nathan, if you took out the just for maybe somebody's listening who's not a believer or whatever, we clearly are. At least I hope it's clear to most people. But even some, what you're basically saying is, don't focus so much. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Go out and enjoy it. And the people that you see that are going out and enjoy it, it's not a coincidence that they usually kill better deer. Like
No.
the pressure is no longer there. You're going out and what you just said, you're worshiping the Lord and you're exercising the dominion, which is what we say in every single episode.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing that, and it's a whole lot more fun that way. Like, and I'm guilty of worshiping the creation. I promise you. When I look at every antler, I think of all the stress that I dealt with in my life just to get that stupid piece of antler. But at the same time, like I wanna learn to do that. And Nathan, it seems very clear to me that that's what you're doing. You're going out and you're enjoying it. You're prioritizing family and your faith, and also killing big bucks at the same time, which is impressive. That's really cool, man.
But and anything else, aside from that, hunt big deer, hunt the quality caliber deer you want to kill, and
sure.
Change your mindset. So that's the biggest thing.
That's so good, man.
So good, man.
Well,
so
dude,
good.
Nathan, I appreciate you taking the time this evening to come and record with us. And Man, Local Legends has got a lot to live up to after this. Like that was so much fun, Nathan. I hope you enjoyed it, man. And dude, we're gonna have to get you back on the show at some point.
Yes.
Well, I definitely appreciate the invite, and hopefully somebody can get something from it. I always enjoy doing these things. Whenever I first started doing them, and it's getting easier for me. But where I'm not a very well-spoken person, I don't think. Whenever the spotlight is on me, I feel like that there's this black curtain coming over me or a dark cloud, and I just go into a fog. But it's getting better, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, man. I thought it was great. I know everybody listening to this. You guys probably, you enjoyed it. You had to.
You did.
If you're a deer hunter, especially if you're a public land deer hunter, you had to have enjoyed that. That was so much fun. So Nathan, dude, I really do appreciate it again, and best of luck this season, man.
Yep, appreciate it, and same to you guys.